On January 18, 1898, Louis Vallee obtained an identity card in Bordeaux, France. The card states that he had been born in Fosse, in the département of Deux-Sèvres, on January 16, 1860, and the fourth digit of the year is unreadable, and that he was presently living at 10 Rue Dupuy, Bordeaux. Notice that in his signature he used the accent aigu on the first E in Vallee. He would drop the accent after he came to America. Let's visit number 10 Rue Dupuy in Bordeaux, France, using Google Earth. We go up to the search box, type in the address, and there it is. Click on that and press the Go button. Google Earth will take us to number 10 Rue Dupuy in Bordeaux, France. And here it is. Let's zoom in a little. And you can see that's a little 2-block long street, one long block and one short. If we grab the little man and drag him over the street, if the street turns blue, as it did, it means the Google camera truck did traverse that street, and you can drop the little man into the street and you will see through his eyes. Here is Rue Dupuy, and if we turn to the right we see these two doorways. The left one has number 10 over it and the right one has number 12. You can see there are two different buildings. The homes on this street have common walls, which means that there is no space between the homes. We look up the street here. You can look in 360 degrees in Street View in Google Earth. So there you see the short block at the far end. Now let's go around the corner. Go to the corner, turn, advance a little. First we'll get a look at the top of the building there. There seems to be a garage attached to it that probably goes with number 10. We advance on the street and look at the side of the back of the building. You see it's not 2 stories and it has been added on to several times. We don't know if that building was there in 1898 when Louis Vallee, Madeleine, and 3 of their children who were born in Switzerland lived there. But at least that is the spot where they lived in 1898, or at least where they said they lived. It's possible that it was some relative or friend who let them use his address in order to get the identity card and a passport. So here we are at number 10 again. Here are the steps. You can see that they matched their steps between number 10 and number 12. Now let's exit Street View. That puts us back up in the sky, and we can get a view of the 2-block long street there. And we can zoom out a little to get a higher view. So that's the neighborhood of number 10 Rue Dupuy in Bordeaux, France. So in what year was Louis Vallee born? According to information on a card inserted into a passport issued in 1921, Louis Vallee was born on January 16, 1864, and married Madeleine Cobianchi on July 23, 1893. It is believed that the wedding took place in Switzerland, home of the bride. The card states that Madeleine was born on April 11, 1869, at Moulin Montrouge. Where is Montrouge? There is a mountain in the Swiss Alps named Montrouge, not far from Lake Geneva. Moulin means mill, and there are several well-known water mills in that area that were known as Moulins near Montrouge. The identity card issued to Louis in Bordeaux on January 18, 1898, was probably obtained in preparation for getting a passport. Louis and Madeleine probably came to Louisiana shortly thereafter. That identification card has this certification that says, "Seen by us, Commissioner of Police of the 7th Arrondissement," an arrondissement in French is like a ward here, "for legalization of the signature of Monsieur Vallee, affixed above, at Bordeaux, 18 January 1898, and the Commissioner signs. The first mention of Louis Vallee in the Abbeville Meridional appeared the next year, on January 14, 1899. The family of E.W. Gaspar have moved into the building opposite the passenger depot, just vacated by Louis Vallee. Louis and Madeleine moved into a home that the descendants say was across the street from the Catholic Church property. Here we have a Sanborn fire insurance map from 1899. It shows the church property. You can see the Catholic Church, and behind it the Catholic Cemetery. Across the street from that property is a triangular block. What we believe to be the Vallee home is highlighted in yellow. It seems to be a larger structure with a smaller structure attached behind. The large building on that triangular block was the Wall Hotel. It stood on that spot until at least the 1940s. The third building on the triangular block was the Fire Engine House. The Vallee home was bounded by Washington Street on the west, St. Victor on the north, and Jefferson Street on the east. Here is a picture of the front of the Vallee home. As you can see, it seems to have entrances from two sides. Here is a picture of the rear of the Vallee home. As you can see, there is an attached structure behind it, that gazebo-looking building, and that would correspond with what shows on the Sanborn fire insurance map. Here we have a picture of Louis and Madeleine standing in front of one of the entrances to their home. The woman walking up the steps is their daughter Louise, who was known to be fond of wearing riding boots. Louise was very intelligent. Several articles were published during her college career about the honors and awards she won for scholarship. This one points out that she graduated from the State Normal College in 1925 with the highest average ever attained. She scored 321 points when only 160 were required for graduation. The State Normal College was a teacher's college in the days before universities had education departments. After graduation, she became a member of the faculty of the State Normal College for a time, then moved to San Francisco. There she married Boyd Wright and had a son, Barron. Boyd filed for divorce, and Louise did not contest it. She returned to Abbeville with her son. She then went back to San Francisco and filed to reopen the divorce case. A San Francisco newspaper published this article about the judge reprimanding Louise for appearing in court wearing riding boots. Louise and Boyd later reconciled and remarried and lived happily ever after. The Abbeville Meridional reported on August 10, 1901, that Louis Vallee is building an office on Jefferson Street near his residence. He will occupy it shortly as headquarters for his rough rice purchasing business. Vallee is a hustler and knows how to catch things coming and going. On September 21, 1901, the Meridional made this announcement. Bourge and Vallee is the title of the newest firm in town. It is composed of L.L. Bourge, the attorney, and Louis Vallee, the rice buyer and saloonist. They are comfortably fitted up in a new, neat office on Jefferson Street near the corner of Victor, and are agents for the sale and purchase of lands in this and other states. So at this point, Vallee was in business as a rice buyer, saloonist, and real estate agent. On February 22, 1902, the Meridional quoted a New Orleans publication, the New Orleans Livestock Enterprise, as saying that Vallee had also been in the cattle business. Mr. and Mrs. L.C. Vallee, I don't know where they got the middle initial C, and little daughter from Abbeville, Louisiana, visited the city and the enterprise during the carnival. Mr. Vallee was formerly in the cattle business, but is now engaged in the real estate and rice business in Vermillion Parish. In 1902, the Planters' Rice Mill was incorporated. Everybody from Abbeville will recognize this building, which is still standing. This picture is from an old postcard. Here's an excerpt from the charter of the Planters' Rice Mill Company. The initial capitalization of the company was $50,000, so they offered 500 shares at $100 apiece, and Louis Vallee bought 2 shares at $200. October 18, 1902, the Meridional reported a very disastrous fire. Thursday night at 6:30, what proved to be one of the most disastrous fires which ever visited Abbeville broke out in McKinnon's saloon on Concord Street. It was caused by the explosion of a tank attached to a gasoline stove, and in a few seconds the large building was in flames. Fire alarm was sounded, but by the time the people reached the scene, Tron's market was in flames and Pizzolato's fruit stand. Everything burned like tinder. Impromptu bucket brigades were formed, and they did all the work. Godard's drugstore, Vallee's saloon, and Stauffer Brothers' store were in great danger and caught fire several times, but the boys poured on the water, stuck to their posts. Loss about $15,000 and only small insurance. If they thought this was a disastrous fire, the following year the buildings on the other side of Concord Street caught fire and burned every one of them, and even some of the buildings around the corners. One of the groups that Vallee took a big interest in was the Société Française de Bienfaisance et d'Assistance Mutuelle et Patriotique de la Paroisse Vermillion, which means the French Society of Benevolence and Mutual and Patriotic Assistance of the parish of Vermillion. It had been founded in Abbeville in 1880, but by March 12, 1904, only 5 years after he arrived, he was the president, and would be for at least 10 more years. As president, it was his job to put the notices in the newspaper of upcoming meetings. Sometimes they were in French and sometimes in English. This is one of the French notices, and it says, Patriotic French Society of the Parish of Vermillion. Sometimes they would use different versions of the name. All of the members are invited to want to reunite Sunday, the 27th of March, in the hall of the Society in General Ordinary Assembly and for amendments to the Charter. President Louis Vallee. The big event each year for the Société Française was the July 14th celebration of Bastille Day, when the Société would host a banquet or festival. Bastille Day commemorates July 14, 1789, the storming of the Bastille prison in Paris and the release of the prisoners, which started the French Revolution. January 14, 1905, the Meridional announced, "Rare treat. Last Friday night, El Vallee of the Creole restaurant and his friend Emile Tomatou, the new chef at Hotel Vermillion, gave quite an appreciated treat to a few friends at a supper. There was a royal bouillabaisse, spaghetti, veal, a fine salad, cheese, and coffee in abundance. Everybody went away feeling that Messieurs Vallee and Tomatou could feed the king in proper style." So in addition to his other business pursuits, Vallee was now in the restaurant business and apparently liked to cook. In 1901, oil was discovered beneath the Mamou Prairie near Jennings, Louisiana. Vallee owned a small piece of property there, perhaps his home property when he first came to Louisiana, and on March 25, 1904, the Meridional announced, "Louis Vallee has just returned from a visit to the Mamou oil field and finds that he has a gusher, the Rain Oil Company's, within 5 feet of his acre lot. He has several propositions to develop the land." Here you see a picture of the Jennings oil field. In its prime, the Jennings oil field was producing 80,000 barrels of oil per day. The reason you see so many drilling rigs is because in those days, if one person drilled a well on his property and struck oil, then his adjacent neighbors would say, "His oil well is draining the oil from under my property, so if I want some of that, I'd better drill a well on my property." So the neighbors would drill wells, and then their neighbors would drill wells, and you would end up with something that looks like this. Since that time, the system has changed, and now the Commissioner of Conservation can declare units of minerals in which one well can develop the unit, and all of the landowners who have oil under their property in the unit can share in the royalties. Unfortunately, the Jennings oil field turned to salt water. The New Orleans Picayune of September 28, 1906 reported that the last 5 wells produced nothing but salt water, and they said this in particular about number 5. The 5th and the strongest of all, and by that they mean in terms of producing salt water, was the bringing in yesterday of a saltwater well on the Vallee Arpent by the Ziegler Oil Company. This well is just 75 feet from the great Wilkins No. 2, which has produced $2 million worth of oil and holds the record as the greatest oil well the world has ever known. So Louis Vallee was just a little bit late to cash in on a fortune. In 1905, Louis Vallee and his family narrowly escaped a yellow fever epidemic in New Orleans. They had traveled there with the intention of taking a trip to California. While they were there, yellow fever began to spread through New Orleans. Mayor Martin Berman, following the example that had been set earlier in Havana, instituted a mosquito control program in New Orleans that he said would test the theory that the disease was transmitted by mosquitoes. People were told to cover their cisterns, fumigate mosquito breeding places, protect themselves from mosquito bites, and take whatever other steps to control mosquitoes. Southern Pacific Railroad instituted a rule that passengers traveling from Louisiana to Texas would be placed in detention camps in Texas for 6 days before being allowed to continue. On September 10, 1905, the New Orleans Picayune newspaper reported, "Mr. Louis Vallee and family returned to Abbeville last week. They attempted to get to California, but were unable to pass through Texas without undergoing the discomfort of the Texas detention camp, and so gave up their expected trip. The anti-mosquito campaign eventually succeeded in New Orleans with only 452 deaths, and that was the last yellow fever epidemic in the United States. On September 13, 1913, the Abbeville Progress reported, Louis Vallee, as per Act dated September 12, bought a half interest in the P. Jules Broussard plantation near the mouth of the Vermillion River, containing 1,400 acres. The new owners intend to make extensive improvements on the place. September 27, 1913, new warehouse. One of Mr. Louis Vallee's warehouses has been doing business since Thursday, and since its opening has been well patronized. Mr. Vallee is buying rice for an independent mill. The other warehouse, west of Jefferson Street, is being moved to the west corner of the Vallee lot on the Southern Pacific Railroad track, and will be also used for storing and shipping rice and other products. Mr. Vallee has received several cars of high-grade domestic and steam coal, and with the new scale he has recently installed, is now ready to take care of the needs of his customers with accuracy and prompt service. The new scale will also be for service of the public, same being centrally located, and only a small fee will be charged. October 25, 1913. Someone has recently broken 23 window glasses in one of Mr. Vallee's houses, which lies on the outskirt of this city. The glass were 12 by 28 inches. In breaking up the windows, one glass was overlooked, and Mr. Vallee says he wishes the party would come and finish the job and leave his address. November 15, 1913. The building being erected on the L. Vallee property adjoining the railroad is going up rapidly and will soon add another important business enterprise to our little city. Montaigne Brothers have the contract for this building. November of 1913. New Vallee building. The work on the large building of Mr. Louis Vallee is going rapidly on and is taking on a good appearance. When the building is completed, it will be used by Mr. Vallee as a store and office. The appearance of the building is very attractive, the front containing much glass work. The cement floor was put in this week at the new Vallee building, located on the railroad, and Mr. Vallee expects to move into his new quarters the early part of the week. February 7, 1914. Big improvement. Mr. Louis Vallee, one of the most progressive businessmen in this section of the country, is now ready for business proper. Mr. Vallee has, since the 1st of October, put up 5 fine warehouses on the ground adjoining the railroad on State Street, opposite the Summers Lumber Company yards. The office building, located on State Street, is fitted up with regular banking house furniture, and is as neat as can be made. The several warehouses contain all kinds of produce, including seed potatoes, seed rice, seed oats, cottonseed, fertilizer, all kinds of feed, and a numerous lot of other articles. Each warehouse is fitted with large scales, and as soon as the railroad spur is put in, will give him the best loading and unloading facilities. There is a pair of large scales on the yard. The yard is being filled and made practically mud-proof. It is an interesting sight to go through this place and see carload after carload of goods in stock. Mr. Vallee is deserving of great credit for establishing such an excellent business, and is, no doubt, one of the greatest additions of business enterprises Abbeville could possibly want for. Success to you, Mr. Vallee. So let's see what the newspaper was talking about. Here is the L. Vallee combination store and office. You can see all the glass work on the front that the newspaper was talking about. L. Vallee written at the top of the building and on the side, and you can see office written on the side. This was a combination office and store. This is the same property where the Ritz Theater would later be built. This picture shows two warehouses behind the combination store and office. From left to right, Warehouse C, Warehouse B, and the store office building. In the background, the building with the dark roof and two chimneys directly in line with the telephone pole was the first high school in Abbeville, built in 1903. That building is still standing and is now used as the Vermillion Parish School Board office. Here is a close-up of Warehouse C, and you can see written on the side of the building, rice, feed, fertilizer, coal. And you can see that the doors are also numbered, probably so that customers would know which door to go to pick up their purchase. Vallee sold all kinds of farm supplies, but one of the things that he advertised heavily was Planters Fertilizer. Here you see a newspaper ad, but he also advertised it in other ways. For example, here we have two postcards. Picture on the front, postcard on the back. The one on the left says, "From Reuter seed, cultivated with Planters Fertilizer, purple top turnip, 5 pounds each, Vallee Farm." And the one on the right says, "Peerless potatoes, grown in ordinary land with Planters Fertilizer." I'm sure that Mr. Vallee gave these postcards away to his customers, because I can't imagine them buying an advertisement. But if they would use the postcards, it would spread the word and advertise the Planters Fertilizer. February 28, 1914. Louis Vallee and Francis Perry were business visitors to New Orleans the early part of the week. What's interesting about this article is that Francis Perry would become Vallee's son-in-law the following year when he married Vallee's daughter, Amadea. Abbeville, Miss Amadea Vallee, daughter of Louis Vallee, a prominent merchant of this town, and Francis L. Perry, proprietor of the Vermillion machine shop, were married Monday at the St. Louis Cathedral, New Orleans. Here we have a picture of Francis Perry, Madeline, and not Amadea, but Louise. We can't see her feet, but she is probably wearing riding boots. When World War I caused the cotton market to collapse, Vallee offered financial assistance to his cotton farmer customers. He put this advertisement in the Abbeville Progress, September 19, 1914, where he offers his customer cotton farmers to buy their cotton at $40 a bale and to hold the cotton until the price went up again, taking the risk that it may not go up, instead of the farmers having to hold their cotton, have no income in the meantime, and take the risk themselves. By March of 1915, Vallee's business had grown so much that he announced that he was incorporating it. The name of the corporation would be Vallee Warehouse and Mercantile Company, Incorporated. In 1914, Vallee expanded into yet another area of business, scrap iron and metals. Bring it to Mr. Vallee's warehouse. He weighs and pays for it. In 1919, Louis Vallee became an officer of the Executive Committee of the Louisiana Division of the American Cotton Association. As such, he expressed his opinion that the 1919 cotton crop had been damaged by the shifting of the Gulf Stream. The highlighted portion of the article says, L. Vallee, scientific farmer, says stream nearer to coast during year. From reports of sailors, he believes the South will suffer from a succession of rainy seasons. Mr. Vallee is known as one of the most scientific farmers in Louisiana, and his studies of natural conditions have enabled him to counteract adverse influence while unscientific farmers suffered losses. On January 1, 1920, Louis Vallee retired from active business. His son, Reno, announced that he would be taking over the business of the dissolved corporation under the name the Vallee Company. After the retirement, the Vallees did some traveling. In April of 1920, Madeline took a pleasure trip to New York with Mrs. Joe Piazza. The next year, this article appeared. Mr. and Mrs. Louis Vallee returned home Thursday from an extended visit to France, Italy, and other places of interest across the water. No doubt this trip was the reason for the issuance of the 1921 passport that we have already seen in part. Another part of the 1921 passport shows their itinerary: New York to Le Havre in France, to Paris, to the Mediterranean, to Italy, to Switzerland, and return. Although retired, Vallee gave his current profession as merchant and cotton grower. At some point after the completion of the new St. Mary Magdalene Catholic Church in 1918, Louis Vallee and family donated one of the stained glass windows. The subject of the window was, of course, St. Mary Magdalene. Here are some excerpts from the Vermillion Historical Society's earlier presentation on the stained glass windows of the church. Here is a picture of that stained glass window, St. Mary Magdalene kneeling. The text in white is the church's description of the window. Here, St. Mary Magdalene is shown kneeling in prayer. The text in yellow is the comment that I made. The church comment fails to call attention to an important fact. Where is she kneeling? The secret is in the shadow. If you look at the shadow, you can see that she is kneeling at the foot of the cross. Below the stained glass window, the donor is shown as Louis Vallee and family. Louis Vallee had two good reasons for selecting a scene of St. Mary Magdalene. Not only would he be honoring the patron saint of the church, but at the same time he would be paying tribute to his wife, Madeline, a variation of Magdalene, Cobianchi. Louis Vallee took a great interest in the building of the Intracoastal Canal through Vermillion Parish. He was a member of a commission to advise the Army Corps of Engineers on local concerns. The original 1905 plan of Chief Engineer Charles W. Howell was to utilize the navigable bayous, lakes, bays, and sounds or lagoons near the coast and make the cuts connecting them along the shortest lines available. This is what his plan looked like. Under the original plan, the canal would have run through Sabine Lake, then to Calcasieu Lake, then to Grand Lake, to White Lake, and to Vermilion Bay. However, as stated in the History of the Gulf Intracoastal Waterway, another development in June of 1923 carried profound implications for the route of the future Intracoastal Canal. In proposing the course of the channel from Sabine to Galveston, Gulf Division Engineer Colonel George M. Hoffman departed from the earlier principle of dredging through the open bays. He defended the notion of a landlocked channel to run along and inside the shoreline, stating, "This route, while a little longer and requiring more excavation, will cost less for maintenance than other routes previously proposed through the bays. Experience has demonstrated the difficulty and cost of maintaining the entrance of a canal into a large bay, especially where this entrance lies across the normal currents of the bay. Boats using this route will be less exposed to storm conditions in the open bay." Louis Vallee claimed credit for talking the Army Corps of Engineers out of the original plan. Here is the actual route of the Intracoastal Waterway. You can see that it avoids Sabine Lake, Calcasieu Lake, Grand Lake, White Lake, and Vermillion Bay. Another problem that Louis Vallee was very much involved with was saltwater intrusion. During the rice growing season, farmers up and down the Vermillion River would take huge quantities of water from the river for irrigation. This would cause a backflow of salt water from the bay into the river. Vallee argued that a landlocked intracoastal canal could be useful in controlling saltwater intrusion by the installation of locks such as this one that is actually installed in the Intracoastal Canal near Intracoastal City. Louis Vallee also used some of his land near the mouth of the Vermillion River to create and map out Intracoastal City, Louisiana. Today, it is the site of many offshore businesses or other companies that need access to Vermillion Bay and the Gulf of Mexico. He may have intended Intracoastal City to be primarily residential, but today it is of considerable commercial importance. Even in retirement, Vallee continued to look for business opportunities. On November 23, 1923, the New Orleans Times-Picayune reported, "Prospective goldfish king's ambition foiled by soap and cow. If it hadn't been for a box of powdered soap and an irresponsible muley cow, L. Vallee of Abbeville by this time would probably have been the goldfish king of Louisiana." Mr. Vallee, who is in the city to attend the Reclamation Conference as representative of the Vermillion Chamber of Commerce, owns several thousand acres of land in that parish and is an indefatigable experimenter. And last spring, while on a visit to New Orleans, the idea occurred to him, why not a goldfish farm? A dozen goldfish seemed to be enough for the experiment. He took them back to Abbeville and put them in a large tub of water for safekeeping until a large pond could be prepared. Alas, the washerwoman had left a box of soap powder in the bottom of the tub, and 6 of the goldfish expired before the error was discovered. Nothing daunted, Mr. Vallee transferred the remaining fish to the pond. When the spawning season arrived, Mr. Vallee, by ingeniously tying moss on a stick, recovered 5,000 of the spawn, each as large as the head of a pin, but every one a genuine goldfish just the same. Back into the tub went the spawn. This time there was no soap in the water. Mr. Vallee and his son saw to that. The tub was left outside the kitchen door that night, while the Vallees retired to the parlor to figure how far the spawn would stretch when placed tail to tail after arrival at man's estate. That was when the cow entered an open gate and wandered by the kitchen door. The cow was inordinately thirsty, and there a kind of providence had placed a large tub of nice fresh water. Down the cow's throat gurgled the liquid, and with it 4,800 prospective goldfish. An inch of water remained in the bottom of the tub, and there Mr. Vallee counted a couple of hundred of the spawn the next morning. "Looks like cows and goldfish can't be raised together," he remarked. The spawn that were left? Oh yes, they're doing fine, as long as your finger now. The children of Louis Vallee and Madeline Kobianki. Amadea, also known as Medea, 1894 to 1983, born in Switzerland. Mathilde, 1895 to 1983, born in Switzerland. Reno, 1896 to 1986, born in Switzerland. So these were the 3 children who came to America with Louis and Madeline. Inez, there is some doubt about her date of birth, but it is near 1900, until 1978, born in Louisiana. Emma died at 10 months on October 4, 1902. Louise, 1905 to 1989, born in Louisiana. Mabel, 1907 to 1997, born in Louisiana. Marion, 1910 to 1997, born in Louisiana. Here is his obituary from the Times-Picayune, September 17, 1927. Louis Vallee of Abbeville, Louisiana, died September 13. He was 67 years of age. The funeral took place the following day from the residence and the Catholic Church. Burial was in the old Catholic cemetery of Abbeville. Mr. Vallee was born in Bordeaux, France, April 21, 1860. He was born in January. I'm not sure where they got this date, and the year is doubtful. Was educated in Italy. He married Miss Madeline Cobianchi in Switzerland in 1893. He came to Abbeville 30 years ago, where he was actively engaged in the feed, commission, and warehouse business. He always took an active interest in all matters affecting the welfare of Abbeville and Vermillion Parish. He was a director of the Vermillion Chamber of Commerce, the Intracoastal Canal, the Abbeville Building and Loan Association, and president of the Vermillion Development Company. Mr. Vallee is survived by his wife and 7 children. One thing I like about Louis Vallee is he traveled a great deal. He moved from place to place, but when he moved to Abbeville, he never moved again. I think that says a lot about Abbeville, and I think it says a lot about Louis Vallee.